Good evening, everybody. Happy Saturday. Hope you've had a pleasant week. We are back, and tonight, as promised yesterday, I'm going to talk a little about a weirdly prevailing theory about how booze, alcohol, whatever you want to throw at it, not only saved, but perhaps even built civilization. And fingers crossed, because, as luck would have it, and this is a wine glass, as you can see, and this is a corkscrew, by the way, what do they call them, the bartender's friend or whatever. For you see, this is a bottle of, let's just get it up here, Apis, I think that's how it's pronounced, it's A-P-I-S, I think it's Apis to refer to bees, but it is a hopped Passionfruit Mead from 2018, and this is from, where's it at here? Apis Mead and Winery in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh. And mead being one of the oldest beverages, and as you can see, it is corked. It was wax sealed, but I busted that up because it was going to take a while. Speaking of taking a while, let's see if we can do this without some sort of a massive disaster, but who in the world knows? But mead, hopefully, if this actually holds up, I don't want to get too far into the weeds with it. But it is one of the oldest drinks. Essentially, it is made from fermented honey. Whereas this stuff, it's a little different because there's a lot of places that actually do it as a beer style per se. And they do really good stuff. There's, what's the place in Detroit? I cannot recall what the name of it is. Bee Nectar. They do some really good meads. And this is proving to be exactly what I thought it would be, so give me 1 second and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. That took far longer than it needed to. I think the biggest problem is I was sitting down and actually could get no purchase on it. But it is open. Ooh, interesting. And this is a white wine glass because this is more, I would say more wine than beer per se, but it does fit the point, or fit the goal at hand. But a very, very nice color. What does that smell? I don't know. I'm gonna flip it over, and then we're gonna figure out what that smell is together. And we're back. There's no spoilage whatever because I actually aged it probably like a wine, which is what you should do with a mead. Very honey, very sweet. And then underneath it, I don't really get the dry hop flavor, which would be the adding of hops as a dry leaf, or the leaf or the bud process later as the beer is finishing. They do it with wines and other spirits sometimes, but don't really get it. Little bit of passion fruit, but not really. It actually just kind of smells like generic sweet fruit, but let's see if there's any sort of dry hoppy taste. What was the percentage on this again? 14%, so basically it is like a standard wine. A lot of honey. Nope, okay. Actually get a little passion fruit at the end. Yeah, that could be dangerous. Yeah. But, as I said in the cold open, mead and wine are essentially two of the oldest known, proven things, let me lower this down, that's annoying me, that we as human beings have discovered to ferment. Now, originally it says, I did a lot of reading on this, and actually there's a link to an article I read that was really interesting. Basically, it all stemmed from humans getting alcohol from plants. And one of the things is palm wine. It's an old, it's still very, very popular drink in some parts of Africa and some parts of Asia, but that's one of the oldest ones. They don't know exactly when it came about, but they theorize it was right around 16,000 BC. So that was, a long, long time ago. Then there's another date, or another beverage, a fermented drink made from potatoes in Chilean cultures dating back to around 13,000 BC. But again, they don't really have a specific date. But now, interestingly, Now, why I said it helped build civilization, because there is a prevailing theory, and actually it makes sense, that humans' desire for fermenting things into alcohol is what laid the groundwork and gave them the motivation to move from a nomadic lifestyle to settling down to a more agricultural lifestyle. Because we know at some point the nomadic tribes, for the most part, stopped being a thing and civilizations began to build. You're talking, the oldest civilizations that we know of going back to the Mesopotamians. And, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So alcohol, as weird as this sounds, alcohol was involved in it. Now, however, since we were on speculation before, let's actually get into a little bit of fact. For you see, they have found, and now here is where we can start actually putting dates to things. There was an archaeological site in Jiahu, China, that proved humanity because of some pottery that they found. There was residue in it, but it proved that humans have been drinking rice wine and mead since at least 7,000 BC. To put that into context, that's over 9,000 years that we have now proven that humans have been drinking some sort of fermented spirit. Let's see. The people of Jiahu made the transition to farming after that. Okay, so here we go. Rice was domesticated in 8,000 BC, so 1,000 years prior to at least the earliest known discovery of physical solid proof of any sort of alcoholic beverage. But it kind of stands to reason. Like, rice was domesticated and grown 1,000 years before they had the civilization set. Not long after that, like I said, it dates to at least 7,000 BC. So there was a 1,000-year gap. It could have been closer. It could have been a few decades after. It's just good. So we're going to stop here and we're going to take a little sip. And I do like, and mead is one of like the ancient alcohols. Actually, I've found, the mead and the rice wine, which, in Japanese cultures would be sake. I don't know if the Chinese have a specific word for it or they just call it rice wine, because I've seen things advertised as just Chinese rice wine, but I'm not 100% sure if they have like a sake term like Japan does. But so it looks like rice wine and mead are older than actual grape wine, and they have found pottery that date back to 6,000 BC, so a little after the oldest of just alcohol in general to actual wine, in the city of Tbilisi, which is in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. So still, even that, you're still looking over 8,000 years of people, fermenting stuff to drink it. I mean, it says a lot about humanity. Oh, it's starting to smell, it's moving from honey to almost like caramel. And no, this is not going to become a wine channel because I don't do wine. Wine, I don't get along with it. I know how to make it. I have told people how to make it. They've told me that how I told them to make it turned out very well. But I myself am not a big drinker of the wine. Cheers, ironically. A lot more, okay, yeah. Now we're getting it. A lot more passion fruit is starting to come out. Because I had it in the fridge. I mean, it's a white wine, and I know normally you have white wines chilled. Okay, nobody's coming for me. But I think you do. And because I'm essentially treating this as a white wine, I put it in the fridge. And now, moving on. An archaeologist by the name of Patrick McGovern issued a very bold statement. That statement was, and I quote, "The domestication of plants was driven by the desire to have greater quantities of alcoholic beverages." Now, I know what you're thinking. What are you thinking, Zach? But if you think about it, they used to think that humanity as a species really cultivated and domesticated wheat for the purpose of bread. and that beer was a side byproduct of that. Actually, that a lot of researchers think that might be backwards. In fact, that humans domesticated and cultivated wheat for the purposes of beer rather than bread. Bread became a byproduct of the spent grain, which is still used in a lot of various styles of alcohol. Where it came from, they were thinking it goes like this. Back to the nomadic hunters. The nomadic hunter-gatherers would often, for wintertime, you have to collect, you have to store. One of the many things that they would collect in their travels would be various different grains. So what they're thinking, and again, physics and science, it does kind of track. What they're thinking is there was a rainstorm and water got into an area where they had their grain store. Essentially, if grain gets wet, ultimately it's either going to rot or, depending on the grain, it's going to ferment. So at some point, they discovered this thick, dark liquid in where the grain was, and essentially, and this is, it does track. There is no proof of this one way or the other, but it does track. They tasted said liquid, found out that said liquid was very delicious, and thus, at some point, more than likely, hopefully we can prove this definitively at some point in the future, at that moment, man had discovered beer. Completely by accident, which is often how some of the greatest discoveries in world history have occurred, completely by accident. It's really, if you think about it, and I know people would be like, no, that doesn't make sense, but actually it weirdly kind of does. That, you look at the other things that humanity's desire to do have created, like all the, humanity's desire to explore, which led to the great seafaring civilizations, the great warrior civilizations, everything, all kinds of renaissances and whatnot. Oh, and for the record, speaking of that, I'd be more than willing to bet that at some point people probably have heard the anecdote that after the Irish figured out how to distill whiskey, there was a 300-year gap in Irish inventions. That is 100% not true. It's a great story. Don't get me wrong, that is a great story. Absolutely not even remotely what happened. Most likely, bad record keeping. There was not a 300-year gap in Irish inventions because of the invention of whiskey, because if you think about it, if, let's say France hadn't discovered anything new in 300 years, let's look to one of their neighbors. Let's look to Spain. They share that nice big border there. And Spain has advanced as normal. How behind the times would France be? And much is the same for Ireland. Like, if they actually had a 300-year gap in inventions, the society as a whole would have crumbled. It's one of those things, like I say, though, it's a fantastic story. And man, if only it were true. There's a lot of stories out there like that, and from what I heard, that actually came from somebody posting it on social media as a goof. But who knows? More mead. Yeah, like now it's turning into something. I still don't taste the hopped part. Still don't taste it. That's fine. May have mellowed over the years, or they didn't hop it enough. The Passionfruit really coming through nice, and it's really good. Okay, so now, moving on. I need to get a better way to get my notes so I'm not always constantly looking down. We'll play it by ear, we'll figure it out. Another researcher by the name of Dr. Solomon Katz theorizes that man learned that the fermentation discovery happened somewhere around 10,000 years ago. Absolutely, there is no definitive proof for this yet, but hopefully one day there will be. And essentially, he bases this on this fact. When you ferment grain, it changes the chemical makeup of them. And actually, for a lot of grains, When they are fermented, they are now able to give much more protein than unfermented. And on top of that, 90% of the time, a fermented grain, regardless of the fermented alcohol aspect, but just the pure physical taste of it, tasted a lot better than dry, unfermented grain. Again, this stuff is all making sense. But now we get to the crux of that argument that they settled down and cultivated wheat for the specific purpose of brewing. Now we get to that. Now man, as a species, humanity realizes that if they want to continue having alcohol, they need a steady supply of ingredients. Walking around gathering things on the fly with no guarantee that you're going to find what you need, not exactly a good way to do it. So, what do you think would happen? I think it's at that point that the nomadic tribes, having discovered probably some sort of water source, I mean, let's be honest, we've all seen the picture books, we've all seen the history books, we've all read it. All the great civilizations of the ancient world were built right near a major fresh water source for drinking, for sanitation, depending on that, and for travel. You just had to. So now they want to settle down, and now they're going to begin growing their own grain. So now you have farmers. Instead of going out and gathering, they're actually purposefully building, gardening and cultivating it themselves. And weirdly, because now you have groups of people, all in the same general area, all with the same common goal of this fermented beverage. Oh, and also, I should also point out, it was also a health reason, much like when I talked about the pirates, that they would substitute alcohol for contaminated water. Well, I mean, you think about, you come to a new place, you don't know what's in that water. That river, maybe it's flowing fast and maybe it's clean-ish, but there's no guarantee. What does guarantee it? Boiling the water. And what makes boiled water better? Well, simply throwing in some grain and other things to make it a fermented beverage. It really, really weirdly makes sense. So now we have farmers, we have grain. You really think about it. And then ultimately, because now they had this beverage, it wasn't just so much that, people were gathered together for this purpose, but if you look at it essentially by the spreading out of it, all stemming from the desire to settle down to get a constant supply of ingredients to make alcohol, led to people creating things. They created homes. They created transportation. They created different ways to do things. They domesticated animals. They made towns. They made cities. They made civilizations, all stemming from the fact that people just wanted to settle down and be able to grow stuff so they could have a drink. It's really interesting to think about it. And you look back to some of the greatest civilizations of all time, how they would pay off some of their people. The ancient Sumerians, laborers received beer. The ancient Egyptians, they received beer. And then depending on where you were, they made it out of different things. In Egypt, they had a lot of barley, so they made beer out of barley. The Babylonians, they had a lot of wheat, so they made it from wheat. Go over to North America, the Inca, they grew a lot of corn and maize, so that's what their alcohol came from. And much to this day, people will not only make beer out of anything, but a spirit out of anything. I do say this, and I defy people to prove me wrong. If there is a substance that human beings can ingest safely, more than likely at some point they have tried to ferment it and make it alcohol. You look at the wide variety of things that they're making vodka out of. Just vodka, for example. Potatoes. They're making it out of wheat. They're making it out of corn. They're making it out of, the bison grass vodka, which, by the way, don't do that, because you know what the bison do to that grass? Exactly. Moving on. But they'll take anything and they'll make alcohol out of it. There's vodkas that I've had that were brewed from milk byproducts. There's vodkas I've had that were brewed from apples. Some actually New York State small distilleries are making apple vodka because weird, fun additional fact, New York, I think, is actually the largest producer of apples in the United States. And thus from the birth of alcohol and the desire for a drink, you have to admit, as much as you don't want to, the logic weirdly tracks. It weirdly tracks, and it's kind of brilliant. This is exactly the bar conversation that I've seen people have. You know, you get the guy over in the corner, let me tell you something about that. Well, that's basically what this is for, twice a week for 20 minutes or so. God, that is nice. But now it's like, what am I going to have with this? Because I am freaking starving, by the way. Like, what do I have with honey wine? I don't know. Like, it's lending itself more to kind of a dessert wine feel, but I don't want anything sweet. I actually want something savory, so I might have to recork this, or at least stop it, because the cork didn't make it. And try it again, but either way, this was really good. And it's good because it's something new. I haven't had a mead in a long time, and this is a rather tasty one, so I do have to give it up to Apis Meadery and Winery in Carnegie, Pennsylvania. So salute to you guys. Cheers. That's nice. That's really nice. So that's going to do it for BS and a beer. I'm glad that worked out, because I was thinking to myself, man, I really wanted the drink to tie in, and thankfully it worked. And actually it worked out really well. This is rather nice. But that's going to do it for this week. Let's see. What am I doing next week? Because I did the VR for Alex Big Blue yesterday, I thought there's another VR coming up, and I think that's going to do it. I already have everything already built for it. I just need to see if I can find any sort of appropriate beer. And actually, something has just popped into my head, because coming up next Friday is going to be a VR for Commenting Collector, also at the 500 subscriber mark. And he wants not only to see your ultimate fantasy baseball lineup built out of cards, but here was the part that confounded me the most, and I've talked to a couple people about it. He also wanted a batting order. So that's going to be interesting. So stay tuned for that. That'll be next Friday evening. And then I'm going to leave you with this final parting thought. If you think about it, in order to fall asleep, you first have to pretend to be asleep. Have a good night, everybody.